The ghost ship of Cabuya Island. The year was 1712, and Jett Cyrus was a man on the run. A murderer by trade and a fugitive by circumstance, he had fled his homeland of Britain after a botched robbery turned into a bloodbath. His latest crime, a brutal killing in Costa Rica, had nearly cost him his life when the locals, armed with machetes and fury, had cornered him in the jungle. He had barely escaped, his clothes torn and his body bloodied, stealing a small fishing boat under the cover of night. Now, adrift in the Caribbean Sea, he spotted an island on the horizon, its silhouette dark and foreboding against the moonlit sky. Cabuya Island. The name meant nothing to him, but it was a place to hide, a place to regroup. As he rowed closer, he noticed something else. A ship anchored a short distance from the island. It was an old vessel, its sails tattered and its hull weathered by time. But what caught his eye was the faint glow of lanterns coming from the captain's quarters. A ship meant supplies, and supplies meant survival. Jett tied his stolen boat to the ship's anchor chain and climbed aboard, his movements silent and deliberate. The deck was eerily quiet, the only sound the creak of wood and the lap of waves against the hull. He crouched low, scanning the shadows for any sign of the crew. There was none. The ship seemed abandoned, yet the lanterns burned brightly, casting flickering light across the deck. For days, Jett remained hidden, sneaking around the ship in search of food and water. He found the galley stocked with salted meat and hardtack, but still, there was no sign of the crew. The silence was unnerving, and the ship itself seemed to groan under the weight of its own emptiness. Finally, curiosity got the better of him, and he made his way to the captain's quarters. The door creaked open, revealing a room lit by the warm glow of lanterns. Maps and charts covered the walls, and a large desk dominated the center of the room. Jett's eyes were drawn to a particularly old map, its edges frayed and its ink faded. It depicted Cabuya Island, but with markings he didn't recognize, strange symbols and cryptic notes written in a language he couldn't read. As he studied the map, a gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing the lanterns. Jett spun around, his heart pounding, and came face to face with a man who hadn't been there moments before. He was tall and gaunt, his face pale and his eyes hollow. He wore the uniform of a ship's captain, but his clothes were tattered and his boots left no footprints on the wooden floor. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his voice a low, guttural growl. Jett stammered, I'm a traveler. My ship was lost at sea. I seek shelter until the next port." The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You may stay, but be warned, this ship is not what it seems." The haunting. Over the next few days, Jett began to notice strange things. The crew, who had been absent when he first boarded, now seemed to appear out of thin air. They moved silently, their faces expressionless and their eyes vacant. They spoke little, and when they did, their voices were hollow, like echoes from another world. The ship itself seemed alive, its timbers groaning and its sails billowing, even when there was no wind. At night, Jett would hear whispers in the darkness, voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, but deep down, he knew something was terribly wrong. One night, unable to sleep, Jett ventured back to the captain's quarters. The door was ajar, and inside he found the captain seated at his desk, staring at the old map. Without looking up, the captain said, "You've noticed, haven't you? The crew, the ship, the whispers." Jett nodded, his throat dry. "What is this place? Who are you?" The captain smiled, a cold, mirthless grin. "We are the lost souls of Cabuya Island. This ship is our purgatory, bound to the island for all eternity. And you, Jett Cyrus, are our newest passenger." The Island of the Dead. The ship anchored near Cabuya Island, and Jett was forced to disembark. The island was a cemetery, its rocky shores littered with tombs and gravestones. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the only sounds were the cries of seabirds and the rustle of palm fronds in the wind. As he walked the narrow path through the woods, Jett felt a growing sense of dread. The island was alive with unseen presences, and the whispers he had heard on the ship now seemed to surround him. He passed strange graves, one marked by a stone fist, and another by two inscrutable heads facing opposite directions. Each step felt heavier, as if the island itself was trying to pull him into the earth. At the center of the island he found a clearing filled with ancient tombs. The captain stood there, his form flickering like a candle flame. "This is where it ends, Jett Cyrus. You cannot escape your sins." Jett tried to run, but the ground beneath him seemed to shift and twist. The whispers grew louder, becoming screams, and the shadows closed in around him. He fell to his knees, his vision blurring as the ghosts of the ship and the island closed in. The end. When the tide rose again, the ship was gone, and Jett Cyrus was never seen again. The locals of Cabuya say that on quiet nights you can hear his screams echoing across the water, a warning to those who dare to disturb the dead. And on the island, among the ancient tombs, a new grave appeared, a simple marker with no name, only the faint outline of a man's face, frozen in terror. Cabuya Island remains a place of mystery and fear, a cemetery where the living and the dead meet. And the ghost ship, with its flickering lanterns and silent crew, still sails the Caribbean, searching for its next victim.